Today we're going to be talking about aftermarket triggers, specifically the Hyve Monarch Trigger. Are you ready? Stand by. Now there's precisely 3 reasons that you would consider upgrading your trigger shoe on your Glock pistol. The first is comfort. Maybe you like the ergonomics the new trigger provides. That's probably one of the more valid reasons. The next is trigger reach. Some triggers, such as the Hyve, have pre-travel adjustment that keep the character of the trigger set further back and make the trigger reach easier. This is also a great reason to upgrade a trigger. And the final reason is Instagram. Gotta look cool on the gram, bro. And that's unfortunately why most people upgrade their trigger, but it's arguably the most important, and I'm sure it probably sells the most triggers. This is my USPSA competition gun, and I'm using the Hyve Monarch Trigger this season in competition. And we'll go with why the Monarch. Now, the Hyve has the same profile as the OEM trigger shoe, so much as that if you view them from the side, the curve is roughly the same, and it's the same general shape, which is a shape that I like for a trigger like this, because when you pull the trigger straight to the rear, it ends up in a pretty much straight up and down vertical face. I don't like flat facing triggers as much because I feel like it increases the trigger reach and just makes it more difficult to get leverage on, but I'm probably in the minority on that. So I actually really like a good wide curved trigger such as the Monarch. But the one thing that makes the Monarch a little bit different from the OEM is that it's actually flat across the face. Now the OEM trigger shoe actually has a slight curve, which is great if you're gonna pull the trigger with the distal joint of your finger. It fits right in there. I don't, I split the pad, so I would prefer a flat face, which the Monarch provides. Now, if you follow the channel, you know that I'm more about performance than I am about bling, and the reason I picked this is because that hump that's in the middle of the trigger, while it makes it really easy to steer the trigger in slow fire, also makes it a lot easier to steer the trigger in rapid fire off target. So what I was trying to do by getting the Hyve Monarch in my practice, and points seem to be bearing this out, is to keep the follow-up shots closer together. And in rapid fire practice, I have noticed that my follow-up shots are hitting closer to the mark of my initial shots. So hoping to get more alphas this season. And one thing that is nice about the Monarch is it offers both a pre and post travel on the actual trigger shoe itself, as opposed to being in the trigger housing back here in the gun, which is nice because it allows you to set up the trigger to have less pre-travel. Now I didn't mess with this, it came this way, but you notice if I press on the trigger, there's almost zero movement before the trigger bottoms out on the frame due to the trigger tap safety. If I were to do the same thing on the OEM trigger, there would be a little bit of wiggle. So the trigger reach is reduced just a little bit, but it does make it a little bit easier to get a hold of. Now there's also over travel adjustment, as I mentioned, but I don't really play with that. I don't think it's necessary with where the trigger breaks on this particular gun to mess with that. But I will say, before you mess with any of this, you need to understand how the Glock trigger safeties work and make sure that you're not invalidating the drop safety feature, which is actually how the wing of the cruciform fits in the trigger housing back here in the frame. So when you make adjustments to it, make sure that it still sits on the shelf. And another thing that I really like about the Hyve Monarch Trigger is it actually uses an OEM trigger bar. If you have been around Glocks for a while, you know that using aftermarket parts can cause reliability concerns. The fact that the crucial piece of the trigger is the trigger bar, it's not going to mess with the timing of the gun any, and I have not had any reliability issues. I've got about 1,000 rounds at this point through this setup with the trigger. So I view the OEM bar as a good thing. Now I'm not going to do an in-depth video on the installation. I'll just show some really quickly edited together pieces, but since this is an OEM trigger bar, you're going to want to polish. Now I've got a video on polishing a Gen 5 action, and it's going to be pretty similar on the other generations, but we'll just quickly go into that and give you a feel for how it goes together. Field strip the pistol, punch out the pins, pry out the block, lift out the slide stop, lift out the trigger assembly, remove the OEM trigger bar, replace it with the Hyve trigger bar. And it's just that easy. Now reverse order, put it back together and drop in the trigger assembly. Put on the slide stop, set the locking block, then make sure your pins are lined up and punch them in. Now the way to tell if the trigger safety has been defeated is to look right there in this little slot. You can see that the wing of the cruciform is just barely on this little ledge before it falls away. So that means that this probably is not going to be drop safe, so I need to take out some of the pre-travel adjustment. And the way you adjust the over travel stop is you use this itty bitty Allen key that they provide, and there is a set screw right there on the front of the trigger. So I'm going to back it out just a little bit. Now when you're replacing pins on a Glock, if you have to use a lot of force, then they're not lined up, and so you just need to stop and use just the right amount of force. Now you can see the wing of the cruciform. It's sitting in that little notch there. It's got much more of a positive engagement on the shelf, so I'm satisfied with that, and we are going to call that good. So this is the Hyve Monarch Trigger, guys. I like it. I'm going to be using it this season in USPSA. It's running about right under $100 right now. It's available in a bunch of different colors. You can check out their website, hyve-technologies.com, and look at everything they got there. You can get it in pretty much any color aluminum comes in and really make it your own. I think it's a good upgrade. I've actually got it on my other gaming pistol as well. There's an orange one. Again, I think it is a worthwhile improvement to the shape of the trigger, so much that I would put it on my USPSA guns. So that's what I got for you guys. I appreciate you guys checking in, and I will catch you on the next one. Thanks, guys.